Hello everyone, and welcome back to another one of our videos here at Our Silver Moments. My name is Colleen, and I thought today I would maybe drop a little memory in your lap. I don't know how many of you would remember these. They're definitely from the 1970s, but I was fortunate enough last year to be able to pick up a couple of boxes of these. One's a Canadian and the other one from the US. And these boxes are filled with recipe cards. And I'm not sure about the copyright on these, so I'm not going to give you that information here, but I will definitely link all the copyright information that's listed on these cards in the description box below. So I hope that will satisfy everybody. So these boxes of recipe cards would be delivered to them into your mailbox, and women collected them up in sets, and I believe this one, well, I think there's around 500 cards, or 500 recipes for sure in it. Goes up to 24, set number 24. So it would have taken you quite a while to collect up all the cards. This particular one that I drew out of today is in set number 1. It's called Old Favorites, and there is some interesting ones in there. So I thought from time to time, if you're interested, I might share one of these recipes from this old style recipe card box. And the one that I'm working on today is a simple recipe that I think anybody could make, and it's relatively inexpensive. It's called Baked Macaroni and Cheese. It's in card number 4 of set number 1. So that's what we'll be working on today. I'll gather everything up and be back right after this. So the recipe calls for 8 ounces of dry elbow macaroni, which most of us would be familiar with, and I didn't know what that was. Our packaging in Canada is in grams, so I looked up what the dry weight of the 300 grams of macaroni was, and it came to 2 cups of dry elbow macaroni. So I need to pre-cook that. So I'm going to pop it into this pot of boiling water over on the stove and then move on to the next step. I've popped the macaroni into the pot and given it a couple of stirs, but I'll keep an eye on it because macaroni can, like most pastas, can tend to boil over if it's not watched. So I'll keep an eye on that and hopefully won't make a mess all over my stove. I've preheated my oven to 375 degrees, and the recipe called for a 1.5 quart, was it quart? 1.5 quart shallow casserole. I don't have a 1.5 quart. This is my 2.5 quart, but I think it was, they meant like an 8x8 pan, and because I didn't have an 8x8 pan, I'm just going to use this one. I think it'll maybe not be quite as thick, but I think it'll work out well enough anyway. So I've buttered this pan. Now I'm going to make a roux for the sauce that's going to go on this. So I'm going to bring you with me over to the stove, and if you hear noise in the background, I apologize. My washer is running down there and my dryer, so I hope that's not too distracting. Anyway, let's get to the stove and I'll show you how this sauce comes together, and that'll give us an opportunity to stir up that macaroni as well. So over here I have the macaroni in this pot. It hasn't come quite back to the boil yet, and we do want this to be cooked through, but al dente, because it's going to go in the oven for about 20 minutes, and while it's in there, the macaroni is going to cook a little further, and it will absorb some of the sauce. So we're going to be mindful about the macaroni, that we haven't overcooked it. I salted the water quite heavily, as you should with most pasta. And now I'll get started over here. So into this pot, I'm going to put 1/4 of a cup of butter. Now I'm sure lots of you watching have made mac and cheese before, and if not, it's probably one of the easiest things that a new cook could take on and be really successful with. We're going to melt that butter right down. I'm going to leave it for a moment while it melts. I'll stir the pasta. Butter has all melted in my pot. The directions say to remove your pot from the heat, so I've just moved it off of the burner sort of to the middle here. And at this point we're going to add 1/4 of a cup of butter to make a roux. So this is pretty standard use of roux. You use equal parts butter and flour to make a roux to thicken soups or stews, or to make cheese sauces, which is basically what we're doing now. We're going to add 1 teaspoon of salt and about 1/8 of a teaspoon of pepper, more or less, more if you like more pepper, and stir that in really well. And then we're going to move it back to the heat, and we're going to cook it a bit. If you don't cook flour when you have the opportunity to, you can get a kind of a flour taste in your mouth when you're trying to eat. So it's better to try and take a minute and just allow it to cook. It will take some of that flour taste out of the flour, and if you just do it even for 1 minute, it can make a huge difference. You just have to keep it moving, because if you don't, then it will scorch pretty easily too. Now, I think that's pretty good, and it's looking nice in there. Now we're going to add 2 cups of milk, and we're just going to do this a little bit at a time. So we're going to just spread some milk in there and stop. And it will get really thick really fast. And you just want to keep that up. Oops, I'm making a mess on the stove. Because if you pour all the milk in at once, you'll just end up with big lumps. So you don't want to do that. Just a little bit at a time. And don't add any more until you've got it smoothed out and all the lumps out. And right away it'll start to thicken again, because there's enough flour in there to do that. 1/4 of a cup of flour will thicken 2 cups of milk, so enough for sure for a cheese sauce. I don't know if I can even show you that right now. How about that? So see, it's still quite thick. Now we're not going to make this as thick as we would a gravy, because we're going to add cheese to it yet. And when we add the cheese will thicken up the sauce as well. So we don't need it to be super thick, but it's important to take the time between each addition of milk to bring it back to the bubble again, because then you know you've got it to the right consistency at each step along the way. So it just takes a minute for it to come back up, and the closer it gets, the more you'll be able to see it thickening again. I'll definitely show you once we get to that bubble again. I'm just going to use this same big wooden spoon, and I'm going to reach over and stir the pasta and just check it, because the elbow does not take long to cook. Nope, we still have some time on the pasta. Okay, back to the bubble. In goes more milk. I think we're at the point where we can add the last bit of milk. And we're going to bring it back to the bubble again. That pasta is not far off. I hope everybody's had a really good week, and we're just now at the end of, well, I guess by the time you see this video it's going to be the 1st of March, and we're noticing a bit of shift in the weather where we live. So it has been, for the past week, it's been cold. We've gotten down to minus 24, 26 Celsius, and so chilly. But we can see in the weather on our in the weather apps on our telephones that it's going to start a warming trend, and as we move on into March. I wonder how many of you have ever had homemade mac and cheese. I'm sure it was, you know, a pretty standard thing in most homes, but in recent years, I think with the quick to purchase, you know, I think with the quick meals that we can buy from the grocery store now, it's pretty easy to make a mac and cheese, but it's definitely not going to be as flavorful as this mac and cheese, which I think overall, if you start the recipe the way I did, start the pasta and then right away start the cheese sauce. Your cheese sauce is ready about the same time as the pasta, and the pasta box says 8 minutes is how long it takes for the pasta to cook. Here I have 1.5 cups of old cheddar cheese that's grated. I bought it grated. If you want a creamier consistency, then buy a block and grate it yourself. The ones that you buy pre-grated at the store are already a little drier, just because there's so many more surfaces of cheese. And we are going to stir like mad now until we see the last of the cheese melted. Make sure that everything is incorporated well. If you were concerned about the black specks from the pepper, you could use white pepper, but you should not, I don't think, eliminate pepper. It definitely adds something to it. Now, in my regular recipe for homemade mac and cheese, I also add a little bit of mustard powder, but I'm following this trip down memory lane. I'm following these cards exactly as they're laid out. So now we've let that come back to the bubble, and I'm just going to hold it up so you can get an idea of how thick it is. It's quite ooey gooey runny, which is exactly what we want. So I'm going to shut this pot off, and I'm going to drain this pasta, and I'm going to bring you back to the counter so you can see how it all goes together. I've got my drained pasta, which I just put back in the pot, and I'm going to add the cheese sauce into the pasta, making sure I get every little bit, because that's pure flavor, my friends. And that pot aside. Now you just need to give this a good stir. Make sure that everything is well coated. And you'll notice it's pretty runny at this point, but the pasta isn't quite finished cooking yet, so that'll change. Now I'm going to pour the pasta with the cheese sauce into the pot, into the baking dish. And again, you want to scrape it pretty good because you don't want to miss any of the flavor. Now, where it varies, and maybe a way for you to tell that the recipe came from the 1970s, is that it says to place thick slices of tomato on the top. So I'm not sure what went wrong there, but my camera quit recording and I didn't notice. So I put the tomatoes on top of the casserole, and then I sprinkled a 1/2 cup of the grated cheese over the top, of the tomatoes that are resting on the macaroni, and I put it into the 375 degree oven, and you set the timer for 15 minutes, and that should melt the cheese and just incorporate everything. And I will show you what it all looks like as soon as it comes out of the oven. Well, and here we are. It's very bubbly, smells really cheesy, and I will definitely take a picture to attach to the end of this video so that you can see what it looks like once it's had a chance to set up. And I think we'll serve this maybe with some hamburger patties, maybe some hamburger peach delight, and that's what will be for dinner at our house tonight. I hope that you've enjoyed this video, and that if you have, you'll consider sharing it, liking it, and if you're new to the channel, please subscribe. That would be really wonderful. I will see you next week. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.